Welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reed.
Reed, I'm trying to bring the energy this morning because I went back, I listened to like one of our episodes a few weeks ago where we did the intro the day after, just like we're doing today, and I was like, wow, I like it brought me into like a depressed mood because I was like so down. So this morning I was like, I need to do some push-ups. I'm gonna get my steps in around the
Wow.
driveway.
Wow.
Uh, I don't know that it worked because I still feel like I'm not moving yet, but doing
I
my
have the
best.
opposite issue. I don't know when which episode it was and when we recorded it. And I think, pretty much one way or another, I feel like every episode we mention the fact that we do the intro separate. So hopefully this, people just expect this from us because, now that we're doing it with video, you and I are wearing two different shirts, thank God,
Yeah.
from yesterday. But I flame out. Like I almost feel like I want to switch up our recording time because you just seem way more on it at 3 o'clock on a Monday than me. I am like flaming, quickly, flaming out. And so I listen to myself sometimes. I'm like, God help me. What was I trying to even say?
Yeah.
And I know I can do that anyways, but you compound the fact that it's 3 o'clock on Monday. So I'm better in the mornings. I really am, even though I'm not a morning person. Once I get the coffee going, and especially if I've had one conversation, just one before you and I do this, I'm in a good spot. And I just told you, Elisa, like who is a rock star AM for us, she always gets me pumped up. So I got the energy today too. I didn't do push-ups or walk around the driveway, but I this will be one of our better intros, at least energy
Yeah.
level.
Well, maybe. I think you're right. I need one conversation ahead of time, and the only conversation I had was with the dogs, so that didn't really help me much because it was a one-sided, affair. Uh, but maybe we do look at like 10 o'clock in the mornings or 10:30 or something after we've had a prior meeting,
Yeah,
so we can
I,
get that adjusted in the month ahead.
I think that's a good idea.
But yesterday it was a fun conversation. We had it with Everett Lynn from Amenify, who we've known I guess now for 3 years. I guess his Amenify is I guess a year in front of us. It sounded like they were founded in 2016. We were 17, but I don't know. I've always felt like they've had it together. And as we talked to Everett, as you even said towards the end of the episode, like he obviously is uh, I guess a student, right, of building businesses. Like he spends a lot of time thinking about it, and I appreciated that it wasn't just like a product pitch on the show. He was more just saying, "Hey, this is what I see with prop tech, and if you're trying to start a thing, and here's the problem." So I really enjoyed it. It was different.
It was different. He's, very well-spoken guy, and I'm excited to see, I was glad like you were that they made it through the pandemic, that they're still around, but I am excited to see with where they take the company. And we pushed on that a lot, which obviously he made fun of himself, but just how CEOs, presidents love to talk about the future. So I was glad we got some decent time on that. And yeah, he has a lot of, I'll say, philosopher in him or whatever. And that was fun. We not to not that it's bad that we don't get that as much or haven't from other guests, but he's very much ready to talk about life. Because when we pushed him on books, not to whatever, spoiler alert, but it wasn't what you might expect from most CEOs. Like I think I put it
Yeah,
to
blitz
him.
scaling or something.
Yeah, right, right. I was like, "What's the one book that we should read?" And yeah, his answer was unique.
Yeah, he comes back with like a Thomas Friedman as his first choice, and then goes into some other stuff. I'm like, holy cow, I did not see that coming. Um,
Totally. Yeah.
so
Yeah, I think one of the other real fascinating things on this one is the competitive set. He was talking about approximate but not direct competitors. But you pushed him a couple times, and I was going to if you didn't, but how that might change, especially if they're successful, right? Which it seems like, with the amount of contracts they have, that they are onto something big. So we didn't get into moat and things like that, but I think we're gonna have a follow up with Everett because he was a great guest, and there's a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, I was even thinking about that this morning, brushing my teeth. But when he kept talking about like what sounded like his peers, he kept bringing up like Airbnb, Uber, or whatever, and it was just like, man, this is just different than other folks we talk to. They talk about folks in our space, and they're really looking outside the space, and I wonder if that's a factor of like Everett's based in San Francisco, so he's around a lot of a different startup ecosystem than the other founders in prop tech we know are kind of like spread out around the country and not centered in San Francisco. So when I lived in San Francisco, I feel like I was all a part of those types of conversations too. So I wonder if it's a factor of that, but I also think it in a way that has him thinking different than the rest of us, which is, has its pros. Um, there's one other thing I wanted to say. Oh, the moat. I couldn't get to this because we just ran out of time, but I one of the questions I was asking him was obviously like, what if do you get worried about Uber, Airbnb, or something turning on and competing? And he didn't seem super worried about that. He did say that like he was pretty open with like the most challenging thing for them was scaling, or one of the most challenging things was it's a two-sided marketplace. It's like the cold start chicken and the egg. Like we need businesses to agree to use our platform. Then we also need the properties, and then we have to like recruit the labor and do that seamlessly. And I think that just gives him such a defensibility. He was saying that they have to be more linear on growth. They can't hockey stick like normal software because of that. But there's so many examples. I mean, I think you talk a lot about Facebook kind of going city to city early on, and I'll often bring up Yelp. But even like with Uber or Lyft, it was for them, it was like they had to go city to city and recruit and do the same thing. And so it's just not something where I don't remember if he said it before or after the episode, but where like a checkpoint ID is like, oh, we can just turn on and go anywhere, right? So I just think like it's a hard fought, path, but once he does that, that's super defensible.
Totally agree, man. I think that grind, like with the relationships, the training, the onboarding, like all that stuff does create great defensibility, really expands that moat. So that a big, Amazon can't just say, all right, within 6 months, we're going to take over this whole ecosystem. So yeah, I'm with you on that. The other thing that gosh, that I was wanted to ask him about was I feel like it was related to competitors. Well, I'm spacing. I just, I said that this was going to be one of the best intros, and so you're going to have to think of something to bridge me here on the other question that I had for him. Oh my God. You're not. You're gonna just make me
No,
like,
I was gonna let you just like die, like
yeah.
a slow drowning death.
Oh my
Oh
God.
man. Well, here's one other thing I thought of too is the audience. So he mentioned that there's like five people or five apps that people use on their phone at any given time. And so like to be one of those five apps is really a challenge and to get into that space. But I was thinking about it from like a I don't know if I want to say a captive audience standpoint, but if basically you go and do the like one of the hardest things for many consumer-based apps is that they have to go and do the customer acquisition cost. So it's like, hey, new whatever Uber competitor, Lyft competitor, in the house, and then they have to like do insane marketing, right? And like they have to spend usually 3 or 4 years of acquisition costs at the beginning. They try to get people on board of revenue, anyways, and so that's why they have to raise all this money. But for him, if it's more of like, hey, we have to get one asset to agree to advertise, if you advertise us to their customers, and that asset is paying a couple $100 a month, as he mentions on the episode, and now they're encouraging every client like, hey, you should, if you want to do dog walking or if you want to get your trash picked up or whatever, you need to use Amenify app. It's our apartment app. Now all of a sudden you have, let's see, a 250 unit apartment building, average of, let's say, one and a half people per unit. You have, 300 to 400 people that all of a sudden jump into the app, and you're getting paid from the property and the people that are using the revenue. So I just feel like it's a really interesting way to spread versus if it like, because why do they even need to concentrate on apartments? They could say, screw the apartments, we're just going to be a consumer app and bring all these services together. But
True.
it's just a so unique channel that allows them to acquire customers for way less than what it would be if they had done it otherwise.
Yeah, I think he did say when we talked about the future that, and that he was talking about beyond apartments, that his dream would be for these providers to get that much closer to the consumer, and it just is a natural or easier way, for it to happen through multifamily. But that why stop there? So I do think it has legs outside of the, as you're saying, just multifamily, but it's also super smart, to start in a place like that, and also have the built-in kind of customer base that he was able to develop through, the raise with RETV. So I did figure this out, and I will get you back for that awkward moment. Not that we haven't had a few.
Which,
And
by the
I'm gonna
way, just to throw you off, I thought you were going to come with a reference because usually you burn me on references. Everett had more references than we ever have. Like that
Mhm.
dude was like referencing Gladiator and like who knows what. Like, I was like, where's this guy? Like, did he write a bunch of source material ahead of time? Sorry, Reed. I just thought he blew us out of
No,
the
it's
water with
true. It's
references.
true. That's it wasn't just about eloquence. It was also the references. They were hilarious. They were great. I didn't even get a chance because he was going through them so fast, but I did want him to know. Like I was like, I caught 80% of those. Because I
Yeah.
think there was one that was from Glengarry Glen Ross where he was like, do you guys know that one, right? But all right, so I haven't lost it. You didn't throw me off. And I'm gonna liken this, like for us, certainly for me, because I think everybody at this point knows I'm almost 10 years older than you, but like in boxing, they talk about time to recover. So it's like when you go to your corner, how fast does a boxer recover? How quickly does his heart rate go back down? And is he ready to obviously get back and do another round? I feel like that when it comes to this podcast, where it's like, oh shit, I lost my train of thought or something happened, and my time to recover is not good, and I feel like it's getting worse. So I'm like, okay, well, that was like 4 minutes before it came back to me. Anyways, what I was going to say was the prop tech. He's a prop tech junkie. I've always described you as an ad tech junkie, and now you're becoming, a blend of the two, which is great, in particular for Digible. But as I heard him talking about that, he mentioned that the owners aren't. I don't want to say as dumb. That sounds terrible. I don't know how he framed it, but they're not as out of touch or risk averse as you might think. But they definitely don't like know-it-alls that come in and just try and bulldoze. And it's like, you don't know what you're talking about. Just trust me. This is the greatest technology. Blah blah blah. All that made sense to me. But what we didn't get to, and for somebody that is such a junkie and has been for the last 10 years, why do they move so slow? If in fact they're not, I guess is out of touch, or risk averse. And I just was really curious. And again, I hope we have him on the show again, but to get his take on that. I want to know how much he thinks it's because they've been burned, or, and I know it's a combination of things because we said it's also the fact that a lot of these bigger players can't move that fast. So I appreciate that, but I just think there's more to it. And we didn't get to ask him the question we've asked a few other people, which is, was the pandemic actually good for this industry? It's like, are you expecting with now 500,000 contracts, like how, and it's not as much about just his business, but that technology is going to benefit, meaning the industry is going to be adopting at a higher rate post COVID. So those are just, I wanted to delve into that a little bit more with him about, why that is. And if he thinks that, I guess, stereotype, if you will, is going to change a little bit post pandemic.
I know we won't belabor this too long. My thought with that was like, why do they have to though? Right, like we talk about that even with our own business sometimes. It's like, oh, well, we could keep doing this, this, and that. But if nobody else is rising with you, do you think as a real estate owner, you're going to break out and make double the profit by making all these other investments in smart tech and whatever else, right? So it's almost like if everyone else is down here, how much more do you really have to try, right? And is it worth the cost? Because many renters, they're also earlier in their many renters are earlier, right? They haven't been around. Like if I was to go rent an apartment now or you, we'd have different ideas or expectations of what we'd want. But a lot of the renters are kind of, on the younger end of things. And at that point, uh, they almost are just like, I'm looking for a place to live. They don't even consider the whole like community aspect and other stuff. So it's almost like the bar is so low. How much is it really worth it? Is it really going to raise your profits to make a greater investment than 2%, like he was talking about?
100%. That's the other area that I did want to get into more was, well, you just said it, but everybody's walking in though. That's the other thing with, hey, it's just $1 per unit. Like, I'm going to change your life type thing. But that's just it. As if everybody comes in the door, and they are right now, I've used the tsunami, I guess, comparison, but that's what has hit this industry over the last several years. So I think that's part of the problem too, is it's like, it's too much, too fast. How do I know which one to engage with? But for him, and he did it, and this isn't, I'm not criticizing, but I just wanted to go further with him on those proof points. I was like, how do you demonstrate success? Because labor and efficiency, like your property team being happier, is not easy. Like, that's a really tough one to hold on to, whereas for us, at least now, obviously in marketing, it's really easy to say, did we have an impact? Did we do, better than last month? That kind of stuff. But for him, he's really having to lean heavy on that. He even mentioned the NPS as part of it. It's like, is this place a better place to live? It's like, you're not the only one that's contributing to that. So it's like, you got all these variables, and you're trying to point to, like, are your residents happier? Is there more engagement? So it's just that's a tough one. If I'm him, I'm like that. I don't know. That scares me, because it's like, if you can't really point to very clear, tangible, trackable, whatever, attributable, like enhancements and value, you got a short half-life, if you will.
Totally. All right. Well, we could keep going. So let's let people get to the episode. Hopefully they enjoy it. And we'll have Everett back, I'm sure, before the year's out, because there's more to talk about.
For sure.
All right, Everett, thanks for joining us today. Why don't you give us a little bit of background on yourself and Amenify and what it does, and why you guys exist?
Cool. Easy to do. Thanks for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller. And
liar.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, now I'll be a long-time listener.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, starting today.
Yeah. Oh, you mean long-time previously? No, I meant forward projection. As CEO, we talk about the future. We never talk about the present or even historicals.
Yeah.
Amen, brother.
And so, thanks for having me on. I guess quick intro. My name is Everett, and Everett Lynn, live in San Francisco. I've been a prop tech geek for almost 10 years, a little over 10 years now. Had this circuitous path into real estate. Actually, it was like an oil and gas and real estate crisis in 2008. And I got yanked into real estate by a family office that was saying, hey, we want to buy a cheap multifamily. It's easy to feel like an amazing investor in 2009 if you have cash, right? And I think that I suspect we'll run into one of those pretty soon again. But and then after we deployed about $100 million of equity in Texas, where I'm from, and then moved to San Francisco, worked for a real estate advisory group, and then actually a private equity group focused on real estate. But I was always like team innovation, right? We had about 15 billion AUM, grew to 20 billion AUM. And I started a kind of a project, nights and weekends, originally for IoT and hardware tech in real estate, and like industrial portfolios. We got into some insurance for air quality, business paths to market, I guess I should say. Sold it, pretty soft landing, and then I was still working for the private equity group, and then I started a company that I'm at now, Amenify. The Amenify is a platform that would allow multifamily owners or condo owners, like very large entities, to staff for services at their properties with concierge support. So that means, like, if you're a resident, hey, meet your cleaning team, your dog walking team, your chores team. We're going into maintenance, but the big one for us is food delivery. So we'll give our software to catering company, ghost kitchens, and really any business that wants to maximize on efficiency and scale into 20 million homes that are a very addressable market where you can create some efficiencies at a micro level. And I started Amenify in 2016, but it's so funny now looking at the prop tech market and how different the landscape is. So I love chatting with kindred spirits. Like, my attitude is, even as the space gets, we think it's getting crowded for any type of tech-enabled services, whether it's leasing technology, funnel analysis, amenity management, tenant engagement, like massive opportunities everywhere, because the real competition, I think, is the status quo. And so it's like a powder day. It's always fun to, like, especially with COVID now, it was like, hey, human beings. And like, let's ski next to each other for a bit. So I love being in the space. I feel lucky, to be here now. I guess a little bit about Amenify. We're growing, but we're still pretty small. We're smaller than you are, David. We're about 32 people, but I think a third of them were hired in the last 6 weeks, so 8 weeks. So we've been really busy. Um, we're at the end of the year, we should be in close to 200,000 units across the country. And I'll pause there. I'd hate to just chat for the first 10 minutes of the freaking podcast. So hopefully that's an okay summary.
Well, a couple things to clarify. So you guys, the way I remember when I think we first saw you at MTech a few years ago, and I remember that you guys were sort of saying like, hey, yes, you guys have all these great amenities, but wouldn't it be great if you could offer additional extension amenities like dog walking services, or now you're saying like meal prep services, things like that. So it's a way for them, like a property that, let's say, doesn't have any amenities, to start offering some, but also those that do have amenities to even start offering more. And it's really no skin off their back.
Yeah, like no cost on their operating statement, right? And that sometimes I think that they'd rather give skin than right like actual operating costs. I mean, we have $200 million assets that have $150 per month budgets to invest in residents, and like what a self-fulfilling prophecy that is. It's like, oh, like nobody cares about our services, our experiences here, so let's invest less in it. And then as we invest less in it, they care less, right? So yeah, that's right. And where we play, and I think like you mentioned this about like defining the landscape. Our industry is so young, we don't even have the right terminology or the shared terminology yet. So I actually think there's two different areas, and like I'll define what we don't do for a second. We don't do tenant engagement, meaning collect rent. I'm upset. I need to talk to my landlord. I have a package notification. Like the landlord needs to get a message back. So just two-way communication. Utilities. I need to book a conference room, right? Like I think like we are not Lively, Mobile Dorman, Zego, Bixby, Rise. Got bought by BTS. But we want to play nicely with all those groups, right? We just got off the phone with Big Read in-house app. Like we were integrating into their app. Where we focus is the managed services component. So we would compete, I think we compete against like a staffing company like NFC Amenity Management that costs $20,000 a month to staff a property for housekeeping. Maybe we compete against like a valet living, where, hey, upcharge your residents, but pay us $10 per unit per month. We don't like that model. That actually, we think that creates some animosity, but I'd say we compete against them. Animosity with the resident. So like you're forcing something on them. It's different than trash. I like more proximate competitors, companies whom I have respect for, Ben Johnson at Spruce. I think they've got a great company. And I talk to Ben pretty frequently, right? Marcella and Jess at Hello Alfred. Although I think like I've heard that like maybe they're like adding to the leadership team. Maybe they got a new president, something going on over there since Adam Newman invested. He's basically going to build We Live. It was what he wanted to do all the time, which is funny. And then there's like one-offs, right? Like a food delivery company like Second Kitchen. I think what they do is great, but it's just like one service. So we would go to an owner and say, hey, wouldn't it be nice if you had a staffing solution for 4, 5, 6 services? You tell us what you want. And then Amenify will provide concierge support that's centralized. Because if you offer a service, you got to be there to support it. And then most of our technology we invest in is actually for the providers, dashboards, routing, checklists when they're on site, insurance, so they can work with someone like Equity Residential. And so we're prop tech in the sense that we exclusively focus on properties, exclusively on multifamily. But if you looked at like what our roadmap and our sprints, it's like 80% goes to the providers and centralizing the support.
Yeah, Reed, I feel like he may be a long-time listener because he used your self-fulfilling prophecy that you're a broken record with. So maybe you're corrected there. Quickly, I have one thing, and I'll pass it to Reed after this. But from the timing, comment first. I still see you guys off of everybody that you named as like the leaders in the space. Those other folks, I see Hey Alfred as different, and certainly it's growing, but it's just different than what you guys do. So I think it's interesting because in our space, we're starting to get a lot of competitors, as you're saying, about more crowded and people are going towards it. But I feel like you guys, for us, that's a nice indicator that we're on to something. You guys, I still think are on to something, even though you don't have a bunch of other people jumping in and trying to do all these other services. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that's, I don't know. I I hate watching other CEOs talk about, they dislocate their shoulder, patting themselves on the back. I think that we've got a lot to learn. I like to think that we've got the largest amount of contracts, and that we've benefited a lot from the RET Ventures investment. They're wonderful to work with. And because truthfully, when we started this thing in 16, 17, 18, it took so much trial and error. Like, how do you calibrate the business model? Will the real estate pay? Maybe they'll pay a little bit, just a little bit. Okay, no, all right. Um, and so it's fun to have, we're growing quickly, like 30% month over month right now. Which is fun. Like, that's way more fun than 2020. And but I do care about competition. I think that Spruce has done a great job. I mean, they do a different suite of services a little bit. I don't know if they've gotten into food delivery. Alfred, I think was a pioneer. They've invested a huge chunk of money into this concept, like influencing the herd of like, hey, like, it's not about the roof over your head, right? It's about experiences, right? And Airbnb, when they eventually form a property management arm, they're gonna put a lot of our existing property managers on notice. And so anyways, I'm not even answering your question. Yeah, we're excited. We want to grow into our 500,000 units that we got contracted. We've got like 320,000 units with like slated launch dates, and it'll, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of wood to chop.
do you think the timing was right? A lot of people always talk about being too early or too late. So do you think 2016 was the right time?
Oh yeah, I basically sat on John Helm's porch before he started RET Ventures, and until he like swatted me off with a broom, with like a really small seed investment, and that was huge for us. We owe a lot to John, Chris, now on the team as a partner. If we were there 6 months later, 9 months later, maybe Ben would have flown up from Houston. Now he's in Austin, and he would have swooped it. And to his credit, they'd have been great without RET Ventures. That just shows you how big the industry is. 5 years before, the owners and managers wouldn't have cared enough. They would have said, no, we're on cruise control. We don't need to innovate. I mean, it's amazing to me that leadership in our industry, Bob Faith, Barry Sternlicht, can get on a podcast and say in front of everyone, the public, and say, we don't really invest in our managers. We don't invest in our experience, right? The building's got to be clean. It's got to be safe. People are going to live where they live. They might as well live with us. And we're going to just charge less to an owner to manage their property. And I'm like, I remember like looking back and saying like, okay, like, all right, I can't say anything too publicly about how I really feel when I hear that statement. But I think that there'll be a tide that comes in that says that it's going to shake up the property management industry a little bit more. And we want to be an asset that helps there. So the timing was huge, right? Like WeWork came in and like, they had death by S1 or it was mortally wounded by S1, right? And but Airbnb like showed everybody how important it is to think about technology. And so I think 5 years ago I couldn't have done it, and now holy smokes, it's hot, right? Like SPAC there, SPAC here. Like true unicorns in the space, and like it's way more fun.
Super interesting, Reed. I gotta ask this now, but you mentioned like SPACs, S1s, and some of the like the We Work, We Live. Do you actually see that do you almost think of you guys as a little bit outside the traditional prop tech side of things? Like where I don't mean to speak totally for Reed on this, but I actually see us going head to head, not with folks that are outside of like apartments and coming in and doing attribution or like conversion management or something. But the folks that you're talking about, I feel like that's on the fringe when you talk about Airbnb and even Stay Alfred or whatever. Like those companies to me are kind of like companies that are starting to move into the space, but they're not kind of from the legacy. And so it's just kind of like a different pond that's, to me, that's looking to then like get into the space versus from us, I'd say, even though Reed and I didn't come from property management, I feel like right now we go more head to head with folks that are traditionally in the space versus those from outside coming in.
Okay, and then the question in there, meaning what's it like to be in property management and see the change, and what's it like to come in from the outside?
Well, kind of that, but it's almost like you're talking, almost like you guys are in a little bit different circle, right? So like when people talk about us, they talk about us with like G5 or apartment SEO or funnel leasing or something. But when you're
Right.
talking about kind of your peer set, you're talking about like, well, we got to watch out for Airbnb a little bit. We got to watch for like, I'll say Stay Alfred, which to me is kind of doing the Airbnb thing coming here. Probably the ghost kitchens with like what, or even like what Uber's doing, like with the food delivery. So just sounds like a little bit of a different pond that you guys are rubbing shoulders with.
Oh yeah, I see your point. So they're like very much so. Most of our revenue is generated from a resident in a property. And so if that's your customer, a true customer, like we partner with big real estate companies and show the benefits of doing and having the solution. But we've just learned that that's not really where where the money is, in the sense that it's very difficult to sit down with um, Karen at Avalon Bay and say, hey, like, you need to be investing $100,000 a month across your portfolio. Their attitude is no, right? And I'll use a different REIT as an example. We were having a call with them earlier today, and they came out of this big branding exercise, and they said, if we were a car, what kind of car would we be? And somebody in the back's like, Tesla. And then like they're like, no, that we're actually more like a smart car because we think we're being really cool, but people are like, oh man, no, you're cheap. This is cheap. Like you really are uh, cutting corners on parts of this. And so for us, the customer, like we of course care about our clients, and like we have client services teams for our real estate partners, but our true customer is the resident. And so when a resident opens up their smartphone, there's like 5 apps they go to, right? It's social media. It's maybe a lock getting in and out of their apartment, right? And then if you're lucky, like there's a food delivery app in there that like really fight for it. And our attitude is we have to deliver really unique value to be top of mind for that resident, because we're competing against Handy, Thumbtack, Uber Eats, Postmates, Grubhub, WAG, Rover, a lot of those contractor platforms that we actually think are antithetical to what's good for a worker, and it carries all of this endemic cost and inefficiency, so the end buyer spends more money. So yeah, we straddle those worlds, which is a kind of a red flag, I think. If from an investor's perspective, B2B to C is hard to get going, which means business to business and then to consumer. And it's why it took us several years to perfect, I think, it's never perfect, but to get the B2B side of our platform in a spot where it was just no brainer for real estate players, biased opinion, to use Amenify. And then that 2C component, that's Sisyphean. That's the wrong word because it's more fun than that. It's like we'll never be done with that, right? Because there's always some new competition coming into the market from a consumer perspective. And yeah, the timing is great. Like more people in the home. We survived 2020, right? I won't sit here and puff out my chest on your podcast and say, yeah, 2020 was this huge year because people were trapped in their homes. No, it was like we were low on cash and we had to very quickly pivot the business because we lost most of our cleaning revenue. Dog walking revenue went to zero. Fitness revenue went to zero. We do community events. Of course, we can't have a sponsorship from a beverage company to pay for events and like have everybody come down to the lobby and get COVID. So yeah, like there's a few people on the Amenify team now that we were really lucky to get that talent because there was, a meteor impact, right, with COVID, and a lot of smaller companies didn't make it because of the revenue streams that were dependent upon a resident. But now it's like if you kind of made it through that, it looks like things are picking back up.
Well, Reed, what a perfect segue because he just did your car. What car you exercise? So
Reed,
like I said,
what car is Reed? Or is it a Digible? Like
it was a Digible question. Yeah, a couple days ago we did our you're probably familiar, as I hear you, quote different, I love your Sisyphean. I'm glad I got that reference, by the way. It's only because of my girl's obsession with Greek mythology, but we were doing our BHAG, like, the Jim Collins school. Like, we went through the and we're 4 years into it. Part of us said we should have, focused here more. And we had, if you asked us what our vision was 4 years ago, we would have given it to you. But it's a lot has changed for us over the last several years. And so we got together, the founders, the three of us, plus our CDO, and we went through the process. And that was one of the questions I threw out is, what car are we now? Because I think that changed. Again, if you asked me that 4 years ago, what I would have said, but I went with Subaru. And David, you went with Mazda, which
Subaru
I
is
don't
way
know
better. You asked me, and I'm like, shoot, I don't even know cars. I was just the guy that didn't call it a Geo or something. But yeah, I think Subaru is was a better.
Nah, I know what's going on. You guys are growing like crazy. You're hiring in Colorado. That's branding. That's recruiting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of utility to what this company already has become and where we're headed. And so that was part of it. But also, we want to scale. We don't want to be, elitist where it's only like a, certain class type or whatever clientele can work with us. So that's where it came from. I'm not saying is right, but it's funny because the two more conservative parts of our foursome, we're going like, up the ladder. Like, I think it was Cadillac, and then I forgot what Nicole said, but I want to say it was
Land Rover.
Range Rover. Oh yeah, then she backed.
She was
off
like, Range Rover, maybe a little too luxury. I think Land Rover is the better go.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
man, you guys are on the upper end.
That's so endearing. Yeah, we're a 16-year-old kid that's about to go to USC. Right. So,
I got a friend if you want to get in on the back door, by the way.
Well, I would say that as this is your podcast, just crushes it. Sounds like y'all are getting paid by Subaru. I'm not getting paid for this, so Amenify's got to catch up.
Yeah, I'm waiting to be, hashtagged right now. That actually happened early on, funny enough, because I was eating Chex Mix and it was my birthday, and as a gag, they got like a pallet of whatever, like Chex Mix, and they tweeted about it, and Chex Mix actually was like, hey, and they grabbed the picture and the photo. It was classic. That was early days.
Most famous highlight of Digible's existence,
right.
basically.
One of our 3 S-hole offices, that we had in the early goings. I have a million questions. It always happens that way, especially with somebody like you, Everett, who's as eloquent as you are and can talk the talk, for some time. Things pass in and then they leave. But some stuff, I was able to hold on to that I want to ask you about before I lose it. So, and one goes back pretty early. You mentioned that you've hired like a third of the company in the last 6 weeks. So I'm always curious to hear about organizational designs, and especially with a company like yours. You're moving more, as you said, provider platform, and you see the food opportunity is one of the bigger ones. So who have these hires been? What do they look like? How much is on the engineering, kind of the platform side of it versus some of the other needs that you have as right now for the company?
Okay, yeah, I can answer all that. I think you can say, how much is everybody getting paid? What's the?
That's my next question.
yeah, pass. Okay, so most of Amenify's resources go towards R&D, and so that's technical project managers to engineers, front end, back end. The way that we scale is that we'll give our technology to what we see is actually there's a homogenous customer set, like a small to medium business that does cleaning, dog walking, ghost kitchens, and there's idiosyncrasies. There's kind of like unique things in each market, but the software that they need is similar. And so we invest more heavily in provider management tech. That's not to say we aren't investing in the real estate side too. We brought in a chief sales officer, Devin Wirt, who was actually, I don't know if y'all met him on the conference circuit, but he's out of the East Coast, who's CEO and founder of a company called TF Living. TF is, we would actually partner more with TF. I wouldn't call them a true competitor because they'll hire individuals directly. That's something that we don't do in our business model. Our attitude is we can't be an expert in any one service company, but we can be an expert in integrating that service into multifamily or planned communities or condos, right? And maybe offices, we'll see. And so uh, majority of those hires were on the end product design support. Had a bit of a bell bottom org structure before Reed, where a bunch of engineers, a bunch of business stakeholders, like mouths to feed in a soup kitchen, right? If for anybody that's thinking about starting a company out there, like internally, you have a bunch of customers for products, not just external customers. And so we invested in the pipes between. So think of technical project managers, air traffic control, facilitating roadmaps. We actually split our roadmaps, front end and back end, meaning customer facing needs, external customers, and then internal customers, because we've got really a three-sided marketplace. We've got step one, you got to make the real estate happy, like top to bottom. You got a fragmented stack there. Jesus, like owners need to be happy. Regional managers need to be happy. Your onsite managers need to be happy. They all need unified data reporting. I'm sure y'all love that, right? And then second customer is the providers, right? So we need products for them. So how do we support them? We centralize all the support and data, give them access to it, help them be successful. And then the most important customers or the residents, build those products. I wouldn't say that we've really hit our stride yet, because a lot of these people just joined. I mean, David made a good point earlier. It takes months to onboard people, but we're excited because these people have industry experience, and I think that we've got all the major pieces we need now to really kind of hit the NOS button while keeping the quality intact. Because that was hard, right? Like we're not like, I'm really envious of companies, and I mean, to your credit, it's you pick the right business model to scale quickly, right? You build good technology, and from Digible's perspective, right, you don't have like geographic boundaries. But for Amenify, it was awful, right? Like a client parameter is, oh, we'll use you, but a key consideration is you work in 28 different cities. And so we say, it's 2018, you're like, hey, like we need to prove it to you. Then you have to sign a contract. Then we take that contract and then we go to an investor and we say, look, it works. We make money. They're happy. Help us expand. And so many, like, how do you calibrate the timing of those contracts and hiring and not hiring too early? And we were bootstrapped for a while. Like it was not fun. Like we had crazy turnover in 2018 that, or early 2019, that it wasn't anybody's fault. It was just, except mine, about like how hard it is to calibrate that, because we can't just snap our fingers the way that like a rent tech, or what's a good example, like Rhino, or like insurance tech, or there's one that's coming to mind, Till, out of the East Coast. They've got some cool stuff going with like smoothing out rent deposits. And like sometimes I read a press release and they activated like 100,000 units in like 6 months, and I'm just like, that Antonio Banderas gif where he's like, "Whoo, like must be nice." And I'm like, yeah, that must be nice, because we have to do so much more work for quality, because there's human beings at play in our business, and because we enable services. So our expansion has to be more compounding. We can never just hockey stick because of the human component of our business.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I could stay and maybe we'll get back to a little bit more of that, I guess the tech team, if you will, and where the challenges have been, where you anticipate them being. Right now we're in integration hell. I heard you use that word, integration. So I'm curious how much that's a pain point for you guys as you try and be an enabler, like with different.
Yeah.
Well, but and feel free to come back to that, but you mentioned the compounded growth, not the hockey stick, and let us prove it to you, and then we kind of that land and expand, if you will, and we'll move into other markets. How do you prove Amenify? What are the success metrics? How do you set expectations? So when you're pitching somebody, and you've obviously got 500,000 contracts now, how does that work? For us, it's not to, but it's easy, like right now we're it's very performance based. It's easy. And we have a lot of context too. And I feel like you may or may not have as much context, so that there's easy like benchmarks and things like, so, and maybe I'm wrong there, but how much of it is an education? Like, let us talk to you about what success means, because it may not be what you thought. So yeah, if you'll just talk us through the proof points for Amenify, and how those conversations sound up front.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll move through the Amenify part quickly, because I'd love for this to be valuable to somebody that doesn't care about Amenify, that maybe is just thinking about prop tech or from a property lens or technology lens. our KPIs are, does the, like, number one, do we help the onsite team? Truth, like that, like full stop, right? If anybody here saw the movie Gladiator, hopefully everybody did. Wonderful movie. Like, the joke that we have is the onsite managers are the most important customer we have. Meaning in the scene where it's like, they go and like, okay, is this person going to live or not live? And that's basically what happens with prop tech on site. Is they call up an on-site team, and that on-site manager, he or she goes, they'll live, right? And and that's it, right? Like, either you're adding value, that you're helping them close more leases, you're taking work off of their plate with all the vendor management, key releases, where the vendor park, God, like, they're like, this person's pissing off a resident, like, I need concierge support, whatever. That's probably the most important. From a real estate perspective, when I open up a dashboard, I care about repeat usage from our residents, NPS scores, and of course, how we're providing revenue and efficiency to our providers, as they're a customer as well. As I think about integration and value propositions to the real estate, the most simplified way I could put it would be that every company, even if you're free, there's a value prop to the client, and you need to find what that is. You got to figure out how to measure it, and you better deliver on it, right? And you better hope that they care about those things, because otherwise it's like, okay, like, I'm gonna keep your paint really blue for 12 years. People are gonna be like, nope, next, like, I'm busy. And then you have to balance the value against the friction. The friction, to me, is how much displacement are you going to have in my operational stack, right? Like, every day John wakes up, he puts a red file in a blue folder, he hands it to his boss, Barbara. Barbara puts that in a manila folder and puts it in a green cabinet. And I wish I was joking that was a metaphor, but I think a lot of clients out there literally will do, take a file and move it to another file cabinet. And they still execute. Like, credit to them in case they're watching. So I think with integration, where I'd say, like, where we're different is that there's no one on the other side of the table that has ever really purchased software like this. Like, it's not like if you hire a software salesperson from a different industry, they're like, great, like, my customer is going to understand sales cycles. They're going to have integration parameters. Like, it's like a very established song and dance, like a company forming in Delaware as an LLC, right, or a S corp. And we just don't see a lot of that. It's like the person on the other side of the table is like, I love it. I have no team to do anything that you're talking about, right? Whether it's measurement, implementation, rollout, training, like recurring training, like how I integrate it to other parts of our technology stack. And so we've learned is we basically had to staff up. So after we close a contract, we run around the table and we perform the duties for training, operations, legal, on-site manager training, marketing to the residents. Like, we just do all that. And so that's the fun part of our business. And I think we've got a lot of direct strategic investors, Reed, is the market, I think, is starting to wake up to say, wow, we just need an R&D team. I saw an amazing stat, and I promise this isn't like I need people to follow me on Twitter, because no one's ever going to follow me on Twitter, but I tweeted this, I can't remember the number. It was like, if you spend $1 on payroll, there's an equivalent amount that you can invest in research and development. Ride sharing, for example, will spend $1 on payroll, and for every $1 they spend like $2 on research and development. And like, there's cool industry comps there. And then, of course, real estate is like, I'm sure has to be close to the end, and it's like 2 pennies on research and development. And so our attitude is, we want to be, if you're a real estate owner that cares about services, experiences, figuring out how to get products into the home, figuring out like how to do welcome kits, like how to make a replete, awesome customer journey, you almost need a research and development arm that's going to handle product development, engineering support, and like rattle all the way off down to customer support. And I think that's just a function of the nascent level of the industry. So maybe when I said it's the right time, I think I'm kind of talking against that, but the clients now are excited about it, or the real estate clients are excited about it. So integration difficulty is just going to be the name of the game. You've got bifurcated ownership, owner manager, which is brutal. You've got commercial nature, turns over quickly, right? And then you get a patchwork quilt where it's like, oh, this, like, not even the same managing company gets to use the same operating systems because they have different owners. And then the different owners, because they price battle with their fee managers, they have different managers. So it's this really weird set. It's fun to integrate with the big boys and girls, right? The REITs, owner operators. But then it takes 12 months.
Totally. Well, I'll follow up with this and then turn it back to David. But the REITs you just mentioned and the $500,000 in contracts, to the extent you will share are comfortable, but how much of like where you've gotten was by design versus some inherent, like with the RTV, obviously that was part of the decision, or I'm sure why you made that decision is you knew that would get you off the ground fast. But where has the growth come from? Where do you expect it to continue to come from, or perhaps change over the next few years? You mentioned the CSA, bringing in the chief sales officer, or sorry, CSO. So for us, and I'm not that I need to tee you up, but where we started wasn't where we are now, and we weren't, I think, totally sure. It was like, let's just do great work and it will grow on itself, and that still is true. But certainly now Digible is thinking way more, I don't want to say strategically, that's too easy, but differently about how to grow and mature past
maybe
where we're at. So yeah, how about for you guys? Like, what does the current customer base look like? How much do you think it's going to change as you get further down the road?
Yeah, well, I think that the first, when you start out, it's just, hey, here's a problem, right? And here's how we think we can solve it. Like we think that the resident experience can be more than a roof over people's head, right? And like cliche. And then it gets into like, how do you solve that? And what do the economics look like? When we first started, we thought that the owners would be cool paying $1 per unit per month, right? And it's so funny when you meet people outside of our industry and they're like, yeah, $1 per unit per month, that's nothing. And you're like, well, wait a second. So I think that philosophically, I can directionally say that we want to keep delighting, right, our customers, the resident, and then really investing in our providers so they can scale with us. Because if the providers are doing well, then we're doing well, and then we can pay our bills and grow and reinvest in technology. So we want to keep adding more services, but I think that for the next 12 months, it's just eat our vegetables, right? I wouldn't say that there's anything crazy that's on the horizon where I can kind of unveil right now. I think that this is the unsexy part of any company's growth, where it's just get really good at your core offering, and because we're growing, right? We're gonna 5x revenue this year, universally, and so the way we evolve, I think that philosophically, there's a few axioms that I would share with anybody, if they're looking at prop tech, if they're thinking about it, the industry, is that I don't think that the best customer is the real estate owner themselves. Meaning, like, if you can figure out a way to make them money without having to ask them for money, it's an amazing win-win. Or if you can give it to them for free and then you make money, together with them, they love that. And that's just a function, and I don't think will change. I think that, there's like brilliant scientists I'll meet, and she will say, God, I've got this artificial intelligence. It's insane. We're going to make them so much money, but if they got to pay $10 per unit per month, and I will literally make them $50 per unit per month, and I'll prove it. And my answer is like, that's tough. You get that's a really hard model. They're getting better. Actually, I'll take that back. That announcement for Smart Rent last night, I think, is a great evidence of when real estate owners will invest in something, I guess, directly, right? There was like $157 million placement of, hey, they're about to make more money. We want to make some of that money. We're going to invest, and then we're going to sign a contract, and then we're going to SPAC. But Smart Rent IPOing it, or the paperwork has begun to IPO it, like a $2.2 billion valuation. I remember when Lucas and Demetrius were getting started, so they're a sister company at RET Ventures, and the business model is like, it made sense, but they really had to ask owners to invest a lot of money in that hardware. But, throw them a nod. Like they pay for it really quickly with like, preventing costs. They pay for it really quickly with higher rent. And then boom, it was like off to the races. And so there are instances, I guess, that prove counter to what I just said, that like real estate owners don't like to put money at work. That's new. So I guess I'm just trying to define the sandbox that I view Amenify has to play in, is make the resident happy, keep the resident buying, power that software, support everybody, make the onsite manager happy. And then if you kind of fit those criteria, like whatever makes it through that funnel is where like the universe that we would play in.
Cool.
Yeah, I feel like what you're saying is like, even if you ask them invest $10 or I'll give you $50, that doesn't work. But if you say, hey, don't invest anything and I'll cut you a check back, then they'll jump on board, as long as it, doesn't really cost them any effort, doesn't break their systems, or you just do it for them.
Yeah, and that's where the friction comes into play, because some groups will do that. Some groups will say, hey, it's free and I'll give you $5. And like still doesn't get a deal done. And they're like, well, like, whoa, why is that? It's opportunity cost, right? You've got, a big super tanker like Aimco. There's only so many projects they can do in a year. And it's a bummer, right? Like they wish they could do 5. They can only really do 3, and only one of them is going to get done well. That's not fair. I'm sure they do many good projects. But the ratio is such, right? Like even the very best technology companies. I had a good friend at Uber who's a global product manager, and it's like one of the best exit ops you could ever have for a job, because there's like, you have this behemoth company, there's 20 critical tools that they need, right? That make an impact for like $500 million of savings, like quicker background checks for drivers, right? And they just can't build it. So that global product manager is like, you know what? I'm going to go build this. I'll sell it to Uber or Lyft or somebody else for 300 million because it's worth 500 million to them.
Yep.
And right. And like those companies have a list of 25, 30 things, and then they only pick 3, right? And they want to do 5. They only pick 3. And it's like, there's no chance we can do these things well if we try to do more than 3. And I think that's what real estate is. It's like, except that they don't have the investment in R&D or the people to manage that innovation. They outsource those 3 things, which is hilarious. I'm laughing.
Yeah.
Like, of course that's hard, right?
Yeah. They outsource them, and if they do try to bring it in-house, it's a disaster, and then they go back to outsourcing. Well, business model you had mentioned, so you guys offer it for free, and then you guys try to get the consumers to really adopt the app. You do also have to get the service companies to then agree to be on the platform. So I guess what I'm asking is what the biggest challenge is for you guys in that, and is there any worry about outside competition? Like you said, if they already have Lyft or Uber on their phone, about like if Lyft or Uber like turning the same sort of thing on and available for all properties. I imagine there's some like sticking points that they don't know about, like the insurance that you mentioned that you need when you're on site at a property. But how would a property really like enforce that anyways? Like every Domino's pizza guy shows up and they're like, let me see your paperwork. Like that's not realistic, right? So
No.
any concern from that angle, and what's the biggest challenge?
Yeah. And so this is like a minor thing, but we do cost money to the average real estate client for our investors or our, big strategic partners, right? Like that's the goal freemium. And then that's small, it's dumb, but it's like, you'd be amazed at how many real estate owners are like, will cough up their coffee. Like, oh my God, $200 per month. But yeah, it's there. And so I think it is interesting that a real estate, like from a real estate mindset, there's this gatekeeper mindset where it's like captive audience, but they try not to say that because that sounds a little bit predatory, like, captive partnership. And like what I try to remind them is that like your number one parameter, I think, would be, does this person enjoy the journey from start to finish at your property, right? They're choosing to rent there, right? Like literally every month. And their options are really growing, where it's like short-term rental with Airbnb, medium-term rental with Airbnb, like of Avant Stay, and I guess there were some arbitrage companies that didn't perform well, but like the ability for a resident to move around is so easy. And I hate this concept that like a real estate owner would be like, great, anytime somebody walks through my door, it's a turnstile. I'm going to make a buck. And it just seems so short-sighted, meaning the the intersection of hospitality and multi, which is happening in real time, um, I think will force multifamily to start thinking more like, oh, I have to treat my residents a little bit better. I have to treat my on-site teams a little bit better. I got to pay them a little bit more. I got to like, to think of them more as an experience manager. Um, we do talk to clients that we don't work with that are like, great, like figure out how to make, and this is the level of, sometimes conversation. It's like, hey, is there a way that we can get Amazon inside the Amenify app so that anytime somebody orders something on Amazon, we make $1? And I was just like, no, we can't. And just think about what that experience is like for your end user. Oh, I'd like to order something on Amazon, but I'm going to pay through something else. And it's like how awful of an experience that would be, right? And then because you'd be paying more, like, oh, we're going to call up Amazon and negotiate, they're going to give $1 less somewhere downstream. No, we'd have to charge $1 more. And like that would be awful but for some reason that's on the table because there's generations of like an old way of thinking about a resident experience and how to monetize what happens on a property when like the real value is the data, right? Like the real value is usage, real value is retention of like the services, and if they're happy. Because if you're saving a resident, I mean, I like to brag that we can save a resident $200, $300, $400 per month if they were using literally every service, right? Like cleaning, dog walking. They bought dinner with us every night, and then they save $5 on dinner every night. Then no one does that. If somebody did that, you'd have to check the email because it'd be my email address trying to like give us an outlier for our data. And so I think that it's really refreshing now to see more and more real estate operators think proactively and not defensively, meaning, fear not driving innovation, but rather a positive approach to innovation.
So the biggest challenge then, is it like getting those service providers on board, or is it really that staffing when you open a new city or something, or like, what? Because I can't imagine, I mean, I know that it is a struggle to get the property company on board, and that you have to, if there's a fee involved there and all that stuff, because we experience that too. But we don't have to scale, like you said, geography wise, or have to go get service companies involved. So biggest challenge on your end.
I'd say it is and always will be the execution and the management of the services, meaning we actually move really quickly in launching new markets now. And because we have a bit of a more refined playbook where it says, hey, like we know this is how we produce revenue from 30 properties in a market. And when you're talking, 30 properties in a market, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars of revenue. It's really easy to go to service providers and say, hey, who wants some revenue? That part isn't super hard. I will say that the harder parts are around, noise to signal of KPIs, because especially with new services, like you add a new service, like, hey, are we measuring the right things? Are we getting the leading indicators done? Because, after a resident churns out and doesn't want to use you anymore, they're like, that's bad. Like we failed if we didn't catch it before then. So I think it's just that artful attention to integrating into the real estate, because you have different clients, different brands, and then managing the services on site, right? And actually, I'd be curious to hear your answer to that question around like, the hardest part of the factory line, right? Of marketing, sales, onboarding, trading, retention, growth, upsell. What yours are, because we're further downstream. It's really the management, but I think that's unique.
The hardest part for us on the services side is staffing, like it just taking time to train people up. But we have that pretty down. And as Reed, when I threw out, like we're trying to grow more deliberately, we try to be, let's not take on too much at one time, so quality drops. On the tech side, the hardest part is compliance. So people will get recommendations about changing their marketing budget, like saving money or moving it around, and we struggle with the compliance side of them executing it. It's kind of like what you said about the green file folder or whatever going to the filing cabinet, where it's like, I've wondered like how much of this should we just start doing for them? And it's funny, I was listening to Warren Buffett, I don't know, biography, and they were saying he didn't want to deal with like having to explain every stock that he bought for somebody and how much, why, and letting them cash out mid-year. So he told all of his clients he's open for business one day a year, December 31st, and that's the only day you can remove money or put money in, and the rest of the time you don't get to talk to me about what I'm buying or why I'm buying. And I'm like, man, would we be better like that on the tech side sometimes? Because then we could just handle it all. But their real issue is like their vendors don't let them be as nimble is what our tech recommends. And so it causes a lot of friction. Now we've built our service company to be reactive to that. So if someone uses our services and our tech, then it works. But if they're just using our tech, not our services, it's a real friction point for them.
Yeah. And that's nail on the head. Hardest part about prop tech is you don't have homogeneity. You don't have the same customer, right? And every customer's got a little bit of a different need, and they pull you in to all those other things, right? And you're like, oh, if we do that, oh, this client actually, we're building squares for them, right? Oh, but they need circles. Oh, well, circles like a square. Like the other half of the clients don't really need circles, but all right, we're going to do circles for them too. And then there's triangles, and then all of a sudden, 5 years later, you're in all these different businesses, and you wake up, you're like, oh my God, we're RealPage. Or 20 years later. And it's that great, like, I heard Stephanie Furman say this. She was at Greystar, now she's a company called Catalyst in California doing really cool stuff. But she said that it's the balance between innovation and efficiency. Right. And like how hard, like it's just whiplash for us on the other side, where the client says, oh, this is great. I want you to innovate and do all these things. And you're like, oh my God, how many other people need that? Right. Because then all of a sudden you build it or you invest in it, then you have to support it. And like that's not going to change. Right. Like America is always going to have like entrepreneurs in real estate that build billions of dollars of assets, and like all of those people are going to have quirky needs.
Yeah. Well, Reed, I feel like he's starting to step into your territory, but Reed, you usually ask about the future. So I don't know if that was your next plan or.
Yeah, and that's CEOs like to talk about the future, right? So that you read my mind. That was my next question. What is and I don't know if you have it or you went through that exercise yet or recently, but the BHAG, so whatever you want to call it, but the 10 to 20 year goal for Amenify. Have you set that yet? I'll stop there, and if you haven't, then I'll follow up with a different question.
Yes, I'll read our 76-point plan now.
Thank you.
And so
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I think like the picture, the vision. I mean, is the North Star is really how do we improve a resident and a local community's life, right? It's really not just about the resident, but really people down the street and the efficiency gains. Like we kind of want to be the anti-Uber, meaning we don't like gig economy. We don't like contractors. I'm getting a little bit of an echo. Hopefully it doesn't come through.
Yeah, we'll fix that.
Sweet. Okay, so then the vision that we hope, like 5 years from today, is that we can look back and say we capitalized on a generational opportunity to be here as a managed marketplace comes closer and closer to the home, meaning like the rise of in-home convenience, the rise of in-home services, the rise of e-commerce, like the decline of retail, the need for people that sell services, that sell products, to get closer and closer to a customer physically. We think that is a good thing for real estate operators. Meaning, people ask me all the time, is like, hey, is Amazon or is Amenify afraid of Amazon? Like a real estate owner says that to me, and I'm like, no, I think Amazon is afraid of you, Mr. and Mrs. Big Property Manager, Mr. and Mrs. REIT, Mr. and Mrs. Asset Manager, because you have the built-in traffic, right? You have the density, you have data, you control forget logistics. I mean, you control the last 6 feet, you control the last inch, you can even get a product into the home. I'm going to do, boom, take two. Okay, so Reed asked a good question around where do we want to be in 5 years, or like what's the future? He used BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah, and correction, 10 to 20 years, Everett, not 5. I'm not,
okay, 10,
not going to give you that out.
Okay, 10 to 20. That's fair, because a perennial optimist CEO. Fortunately, we're hiring around me to bolster against that optimism. I'm thinking it's going to take 5. It'll probably take 15. In 15 years, my hope is that we could look back and say that Amenify was there and hopefully a market leader in shepherding residential real estate into what I think will be a new arm of retail real estate, meaning, the services that are brought to the home, the rise of in-home convenience, the rise of e-commerce, like things brought to people on their couch, the declining foot traffic for a traditional mall, inline retail dropping off. It'll evolve. It's not, I'm not going to play into that narrative, the retail apocalypse. Like there'll be like people like to gather, people like to go to the office, but the density, the data, the audience, the built-in traffic that these residential managers have, we think is a prime opportunity to bring services and products into the home. And so I'd like to say that Amenify was there in true partnership with our real estate owners and managers. I mean, we want to help them make money on this, and to be there as, I'd say, like the leader that does services, does products, helps think about data, helps treat our residents as valued customers, right? Like that's first and foremost, the resident comes first. So everything we do has to be done in a way that takes care of the resident, helps the provider, helps the manager, win, win, win. But the expansion from services into in-home products is something that we think will be very big, and it's just this natural evolution of where residential real estate is going.
Cool. Well, Everett, what else have we not gotten to that we should make sure we do get to, or questions that you have? I don't care. What do you want to talk about?
Well, we talked. I like talking about the dynamic between the, how do you innovate in our industry? How does one grow? I guess the management of a client, and really, like, I'd be curious how y'all do this around like unified reporting and dashboards, because you have some clients that want to like care about data, right? And then there's some clients that are just like, hey, this is kind of a check the box for me. I'm really busy. I just want to come in once a quarter, once a year, and see that you're doing your job. And I guess my question to you, and maybe what we talk about, is what do you think that pie chart looks like of your customers that like really care about unified data? How do you get that to them, right? Because that's what we're investing in now, is like really simple access, like BI tools. And I guess I'm just curious how y'all are approaching that and how you see it and what you've learned, because you're pretty big now. You do a lot of reporting.
Yeah, well, we've that was a big reason for doing the vision setting session, is because we have so much there that we're looking to integrate and pull together. The problem is we have so many different customers, meaning personas. We have we originally went to market for the marketer. Now we find that the like the RPMs and the directors of operations started to get involved, and now we're starting to get a lot of ownership groups involved. And so those people all have different things, and they all use different systems and BI tools, and they don't have a unified source of truth. And so back to your the marketer, often if we just sell to the marketer, then we know that retention is probably not as strong on tech because they, nobody gives them much budget. You talk about 2 pennies on the dollar. That's about what respectively the marketer gets when it comes to their all in for marketing, and then they have to try to figure out how to afford any expenses. I have a very large customer, top 10, that says they are being questioned on if they should be allowed to expense Trello because they want to keep track of their workload. And it's like, you can't expense like a $7 a month thing. Like that just shows that there's an issue, right? But you're also, I won't give names of the, well, like publicly, but that you're the third vendor in 6 weeks I've talked to that has said the same thing, that they're working on like how much should they be providing and whatnot. So I often say to Reed, like I wish there was like a Zapier or like like a funnel IO connector for all the different data sources so that people could port it wherever they wanted. So that, Everett, if you surprise us here and sell Amenify in the next six months, please go make one of those, because that's what this industry needs. And it would, save a lot of waste. But Reed, how would you answer that question?
Not much differently. I think you said vendor, we're suppliers, right? But I was gonna ask that my follow-up before I moved upstairs here, so apologies, but the Wyckoff Circus is about to come home, my 3 girls. So uh, yeah, just saving us all that interruption. But I forget Todd's last name. From anyone home? What's his last name?
Oh, isn't it with a K? I'm terrible with last names, Reed.
Anyways, that was my part 2, regardless of in a way what the 10 to 20 year vision was for Everett and Amenify. But he said to us, because it was only our 2nd year, I think, when we met him, and I don't think it was at MTech, but it may have been, David. He said, "Are you selling or not?" And it was obviously a pretty blunt, question. But he's like, "You guys need to know that. Like, you can't wait a few years before you make that decision." And sure enough, we've waited a few years and we still haven't made that decision. So for us, we like the optionality. That's the word we've been using lately. But I'm curious for you, to, again, the extent you're willing to share, had you made that decision in the first year, the way Todd says that, because he's a guy that has been around, networked. He's like, I've seen a lot come in and out of this space. And most recently, all the prop tech that's bubbling up. And the thing that most people don't know that they really should when they come into this space is what their real intent is with the business. And so, I don't want to say we were tongue tied, but we kind of were non-committal. It's like, sorry to disappoint you, but we haven't made that decision yet. And we have ways to go before we're probably going to cross that bridge. So I don't know if you can hear the bark in the background. I'm sorry.
No,
But
you're good. The mic is money.
all right, good. So yeah, what's your response to that, Everett?
Yeah, it's funny because some people will dance around that question because it's really easy to, because a lot of times when you have to speak publicly, all you're trying to do is not piss off a stakeholder, right? So everybody's like, okay, like I'm not offending it, right. Okay, if I say this, does that hurt this person's feelings? I don't really. Maybe I've just been doing this long enough now that I feel that I strongly enough that I don't want Amenify to sell to an incumbent that is in our space, that perpetuates the cycle, and I'm sure, right, like that's what a lot of CEOs say. He or she's like, yeah, we're gonna change the mold, and then one day like a check arrives in the mail, and they say, uh, okay, you know what? I'm going to call up David and Reed and say I need to delete that podcast because we're selling. But my hope for Amenify is that we're able to influence and advance the industry, not in a way that feeds up into a Yardi RealPage portfolio. That would not be my hope. And it's like, I guess it's not a secret to say that many people that sell to RealPage, who's the more active buyer, don't enjoy it, right? They don't like going to work at RealPage because they have said, oof, like it's kind of different, and I'm here for a bit and my earnout is up and I'm out. And then for a while they were just paying in cash above market because they knew people wouldn't accept the offer if it meant they had to work there. Wow, like what does that say about the culture of our industry? So I'll probably regret saying this, but like, no, I don't want to sell the RealPage. And like, I want Amenify to be a consumer company first, meaning that we invest in our resident relationships in a way that advances the brands and enhances the experience for our real estate. Like our number one job is to make sure that the real estate managers provide an amazing experience and like don't have the work associated with staffing, right? But I don't think that's congruent with the heavy hitters. But it's like I'm a little fish. They're, big blue whale, right? Like I'm yipping about things that I'm about to learn things that they forgot 10 years ago. So I think coming at it with a little bit of confidence to say, hey, like here's what I hope we do. Like I'm confident enough to put a foot forward. But then, to have a little bit of humility to say, hey, like there's still things that we're going to learn along the way. And I don't know what the blend is. Maybe it's in my head, I think it's 50-50. I'm like, no, people are like, no, dude, you're like 90% overconfident, 10% humility. And you probably need to calibrate a little bit more humility in. I think that the most important thing, if anybody's new coming into prop tech, one message I would tell all my technology friends is that real estate owners, managers, operators, all the way like top to bottom, are not dumb. Like they are not dumb people. And like if you come in with this hubris of, oh, I have amazing, wonderful MIT trained engineers and I build amazing mousetraps and like you'll never understand it and like down, really bad. And it's not true. Like, I mean, it's like you learn quickly that's an awful take and you're not going to win a lot of friends or influence people. But more importantly, the truth behind it is it's wrong. These are very smart people that like the way we can be nimble, they can't. And they're very smart. They just move more slowly. I was actually really excited for WeWork to go public because I was going to short the hell out of that stock because there's no way that you've got Jonathan Gray at Blackstone who's like, oh yeah, we're going to let this dude eat our lunch and to the tune of 40% into perpetuity. No way. And like, there's 50 names I could rattle off that wouldn't mean anything here. They're like all thinking the same thing. Like, oh, we're just going to tinker with this on our own. But somebody coming in with an arbitrage model, no. And that's why I'm happy to see groups like doing the hospitality approach, fee management, right? Like Roman, who's at started Casa. I think they've got a great model. Like an arbitrage play in prop tech is basically saying, I'm smarter than you. I always will be. And like, I'm smart. You're dumb. I'm big. You're small. There's nothing you can do about it. So if anybody gets that movie reference, and that's so wrong. I think it's short-sighted. It's arrogant. It's fundamentally like the market will spit you back out. Sure, you could be happy like Adam Newman, like make your $1 billion. Everybody goes bankrupt. All your employees are pissed. He walks away with a bunch of money. I don't regret saying that publicly. Like that's crap. But he was enabled, like from an entrepreneur perspective, from a capitalist perspective, he did his job. He took advantage of the system. And like, I'm sure he believed in everything that he was doing. I'm sure everyone else believed in what he was doing. But I would say that as a slightly educated perspective, what's what I'm looking for, an audience member, like somebody that is witnessing it, I knew it was going to end poorly because if you come in and say like I'm here and the real estate's always going to be here, just because you can't see them moving glacially, like they'll catch up. And so that's just the philosophy that I would embed into anything that Amenify does. I feel strongly about that, is that, have healthy respect for the real estate. It's their asset, right? Don't get hung up on these other gatekeepers. And like, if you do it within a partnership, like we can make money together. I think that that's the fun platform for innovation. I would want Amenify to become an incubation testing ground where like 15 years from now, we're figuring out how to, plug in the hoverboards, right? And like, that's a part of the services and the experience. The truth is we'll probably everybody will have headsets and we'll all be working for Alibaba or Amazon. But like that anyway, that was a long-winded approach to whatever the original question was. I can't even remember.
Spoken like a true CEO, It's
I don't know what the question was, but I've answered it.
Do you plan to sell or not sell? When did you know that? And 20 minutes later, this is where we landed. So good job, Everett.
No, yeah.
None of us remember the question either, so you perfectly answered it.
Thank you. Yeah. But sign of a good politician. It's like, that's an interesting question. Let me answer this other thing.
Yeah. I already know what your second career is or could be. One more, David. So we've been, we mentioned doing the Collins Vision Porous or whatever the Porous Collins framework, whatever. What I'm trying to say is do you have a book for me and David or I guess anybody else where it's like, this will change your life. So we've been mowing through, I feel like together we've probably knocked out, and some of this, I mean, it not to go off on a tangent, but I mean, it comes in cycles and, different things of what we're interested in. But for you, it's like, what's at the top of your list? I mean, you obviously a very educated guy, and you've been, very, I could tell, like, vested in the entrepreneurial, like, track, it seems to me. So yeah, lay it on me. What's your one or two books? It's like, if you got to read this if you haven't.
It's a great question. There's kind of, let me talk through it for a second. I don't have like a rapid fire answer, and let me tell you why. Because it's like the biggest shifts in my career. So I started out doing chemical engineering, I'm from Houston, and like a book that like was like a sledgehammer. Oh, there's the echo. Better go quick. A book that was a sledgehammer for me was Hot, Flat, and Crowded by Thomas Friedman. And it like woke me up. I was like, wait a second, I'm just following in the footsteps of what I think I'm supposed to do, work in oil and gas. And so that's when I shifted. Okay, like, I'm not sure what I want to do, average guy, and like, want to throw my shoulder into a cart. So I got into like finance, econ, investing. And that's just like, you're looking for something to do. For me, no disrespect. And the books that shaped, I guess, what I do now are they're definitely not business books. Business books to me are how you get somewhere. The most important books are the why, the where, right? And so, this probably will break the mold and probably isn't even that helpful, but like, I would encourage people to get in, like, to just get out of their own head, travel, like read books on spirituality, read books on what they want their life to be about. Clayton Christensen, How to Measure Your Life, is probably like the easiest, shortest one. There's even like a little pamphlet. It's like the condensed version where he gave a speech. He passed away last year. That's sad. But I think that those are the best books, right? To take a step back and say, okay, I'm 85 years old. I can't talk to a lot of family and friends anymore, at least not in a traditional sense, depending on what you believe. And like, okay, what did I do? I got time, I got energy. People think we have other resources besides that. Maybe you could say focus. I'd say that's energy. And it's like, what do you trade those things for? Sometimes people trade it for money. Sometimes people trade that for relationships. Sometimes people trade that for their health, right? Lots of it's important, but those are the big ones, I'd say. Like the profundity of like, what are you going to do with your life? I mean, I love my job because I kind of like threw myself into it, and it was an industry that I care about. But there's other projects that I'll do after this that I'm passionate about. And I would say that, whoever this is a trope, right? Of, nothing great accomplished without enthusiasm. It's like, figure out what the heck that you're enthusiastic about and just go for it. And ideally do it in a way that you can't get out of it. Because if you can't get out of it, that's when the magic happens. If you have a plausible excuse to get out, it's like, oh, it was a side project, or, I didn't really want it, that thing, or I didn't, chase after that, partner, or that girl, or it's really where the magic happens in the committing. So the books around the why and the where are really what I'm interested in. That's like an interview question I'll ask, is like, why do you do anything?
Well, Everett, thank you for all the time that you've given us today. I think this is really interesting. I also love that it's a different perspective. Like a lot of folks, when we have them on, we focus way more around, the same marketing materials that you can find on their website or listen to them at other conferences. But I love that you're getting deeper, into this and how to enter the prop tech space and some of the challenges there that, in the ecosystem. But is there anything that, final words or anything that you wanted to leave us with that we didn't touch on that you wanted to make sure we cover?
No, I mean, I'm flattered that y'all would ask. I'm very impressed, of course, right? And like, you guys are crushing. So, it's fun to be just along the path, maybe a little bit further behind on the path. But it's great. I guess one of the reasons that I wouldn't get into anything too specific is that I would hate for somebody to call me up and say, hey, I care about this like really unique little detail that you do, or like in your life. Or Amenify, right? I care about this like little thing, like this little widget that you have over here, and I want to work with you about this little widget. Like, honestly, I don't care. I don't like. I would like we're at this stage now where it's like, hey, you either get excited, like like you want to hop out of bed because we're working on something that's different and we're excited about it, or you don't, right? Or like if you're a client, like this resonates, awesome. But more often than not, I got to go knocking on doors. And so I just it's more fun to align with people and connect with people on the big stuff. Why get out of bed at all? And so, yeah, sorry if some of it was meandering. People are just like, I do not care about how to measure my life.
They wouldn't be listening to the podcast if they didn't like meandering. That's all we do.
Right on. Yeah, well, it was a pleasure. It's great to hang out, and I'm excited. Like if and when we get back on the road together, hopefully see y'all out there. But definitely in Denver. I'm doing some more trips out.
Cool.
Without a doubt, I have really enjoyed it, Everett. I mean, obviously you're a great speaker. I'd love to do it again. Like, we just have to pick the time. So, maybe we just make it an annual thing. But yeah, it was really fun, and there's a lot more questions I didn't get at, and I'm sure David as well. And if you have more curiosity around Digible, we're happy to share.
Right on. It's good stuff, guys. I'll put it down for next year at the latest, and hopefully see you before then.
Excellent.
Cool.